Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. If you are new, I am Patricia and I'm a UX UI designer focusing on XR and Web3 technologies. Here on YouTube, I make videos about design, productivity and future technologies to make sure you stay up to date with everything that is going on in the design world. You might have learned in design school that user-centered design is the non-plus-ultra, but actually it is not, and it even might be pretty outdated. And I am going to explain why in this video, so stay tuned. It is worth taking a brief look at the development over the last few decades. User-centered design, UCD, is an approach to designing interactive systems that places the user in their needs in the center of the design process. And this approach has been around for a really long time. It was first coined in 1986 by the book User-Centered System Design, New Perspective on Human-Computer Interaction by Donald A. Norman and Stephen W. Draper. There's actually a D norm which defines this approach. Now it uses the term human-centered design to acknowledge that more stakeholders are affected by a product or service than just its users. We are currently in an extremely exciting time, which brings with it in many new opportunities. Last but not least, the pandemic has made it clear how important our responsibility to society is. Not just to the individual user and other possible stakeholders, but to society. So two factors currently speak for a new definition of user-centered design. First, business models and the way we use and consume products that have changed dramatically in the recent years. We are moving away from traditional ownership models toward shared business models and platforms in which the user group is expanding and becoming increasingly difficult to define. As the issue of design and ethics increases, users question products and their strategies and increasingly react negatively to unethical practices. So we as a society are becoming more critical, are beginning to understand methods of manipulations and are questioning products in general. And the way in which people, also our society, are included in the long term and holistically especially. Changing the focus from short-term successes to long-term goals is therefore essential. So what role does society-centered design play in my work? And even taking account long-term effects on society and the planet? So, good question. I work with a lot of customers on the innovation product and future product, especially with technologies outside of the normal interface, like mixed reality solutions or even smart assistants with voice design, any kind of integration. And especially with these newer topics, we are already trying to see the focus or shifting the focus from individual user to the long-term positive impact for both business and society. This starts with smaller usability issues such as, does gesture control make sense for an augmented reality application that is used in places with many people? Do other people in the area, who doesn't belong to that group, but who are in that area, possibly feel disturbed by the gestures? And it goes as far as data protection and privacy issues, which are particularly important when it comes to artificial intelligence. So what does society-centered design mean for the role of UX designers? And there it really gets interesting. How do approaches, methods and processes have to change? Yeah, so a lot of work is currently being done in product cycles, and depending on the processes, sometimes it's like thinking from design sprint to design sprint. And in order to set up a holistic society-centered design strategy, or long-term planning is required and is super necessary. And to do this, UX designers need to be involved in the roadmap planning and long-term strategic alignment. That's the important part here. So society centricity cannot be achieved with current UX method and processes, right? But it's primarily aimed on short-term success. But for long-term goals, we really need to have new approaches, an exchange with other departments, and a focus on the ethical aspect of products. Our user centricity and business value are and will continue to be important for successful products. So I don't think either of the two will be swept out or something. Rather, I think that in the near future, we will get a third area of society. So really think about the user, business, and society. So what risk do I think comes with purely user-centered design? So currently in the common design approach of user-centered design, it focuses on mainly two things. The first is to focus on the user in order to create products and services that people want and that solve their problems for them. And this is often referred to, as needs. The second point follows a growth imperative and a financial measurable success. And one of the biggest problems with user-centered design is certainly the focus on short-term success and unfortunately less on the long-term consequences. So when I'm talking about like short-term successes such as, increasing the conversion rate for a higher customer rating or bring more money with the current methods and processes, things like that, right? So the risk we take with this, as with any short-term strategy, is that, the wrong decisions will be made in the long term. So trends and changes in needs will not be noticed and ultimately companies will be left behind by the competition. And this carries risk, such as not being optimally positioned in the long run, but also in missing out on being part of a movement that is bigger than the current design sprint and even, much, much more important than all the tiny things that we are working on right now. So there's so much opportunity there. So you might wonder, how can companies and clients be persuaded to think more along the lines of society-centered design? And that's actually a really, really good question. So I would say it's all about profit optimization. It's still, because this is really the focus of all applications. So user centricity primarily brings money. If the user likes to use the product, finds their way around easily, spends as much time as possible with the product, and easily even recommend it to others, to friends, for example, this means success. And success is associated with financial gain. So the main question for me is how can we measure that in a new approach that focuses on our society, promises just as much or even more profit and financial success? So idea number one is really live society centricity as part of the branding and the user or society experience within the process. If user-centered design becomes society-centered design, then user experience becomes society experience. And such decisions require a mindset shift and change the approach to problems and to challenges within companies. That is why society centricity should become part of the branding and communication and really should be communicated openly to the outside world. When society centricity becomes part of the branding, it becomes part of the company and thus the North Star for any decision. So when it comes to successful brands and a successful user experience or a society experience, how we call it now, another option is to eliminate the negative effects of only focusing on the user. An interesting example is the many electromobility companies that have decided to remove the docking stations for the rented vehicles, giving the user the opportunity to leave the vehicle anywhere. At first glance, this sounds extremely pleasant for the user, right? So, but what was not considered or deliberately ignored were the associated consequences for the rest of the society. So, who had to deal with the parked vehicle on path or driveways and exits and entrances? This not only caused an extremely poor perception of these companies, but a lot of criticism as well as active demolition of the vehicles by angry passengers. So point number 2 is employee new work goal. So our working environment is changing. As a result of major issues such as new work and not only, the desire for flexible working hours, but also the ever-increasing urge for self-fulfillment as becoming part of our society. The acknowledge that day-to-day work is part of a larger mission, that long-term positive consequences for our society will not only motivate employees, but also ensure more cohesion within projects and entire companies. Point number 3 is create external incentives. So if user-centered design primarily focuses on the user and ensures that they love the product and spend money, the question arises as to who will monetize society-centered design, right? And the simple answer to this would be society. Incentives could motivate companies. What works for many other projects, such as the COVID test centers, can also work for society-centered design methods. So what are the biggest challenges for society-centered design now? What problems can be addressed with this approach? So the greatest challenge for society-centered design is certainly feasibility. In addition, there is the difficult discussion about the importance of long-term goals and a well-thought-out strategic orientation of many companies. Putting short-term success on hold for the time being in order to have better long-term chances on the market may seem risky for many, especially the investors. I totally get that. But when we measure the success of design, we do it with data. However, the truth is that data and numbers do not necessarily represent a person. So in most cases, data represents multiple people, right? So for example, location data indicates where the user was with other people, or he purchases something online, buys food, for example, which are not only for the user itself, but for many other people, right? So he maybe ordered behalf of their partner or children. So data is social in nature and it represents society. I see this educational work as the task of us designers. We should shed light on risk and the user, and then really start discussions around the topic of society-centered design. So let's talk about some example of products and services designed within this, or designed with this mindset. Some services that have been developed with the society-centered design approach are, for example, Uber and Airbnb. So, Uber's original approach was for drivers who are currently driving and already, have a user themselves, picking up other users who are also traveling in the same direction and combine the journey. As a result, further vehicles could be saved on the roads, so this was not only beneficial for the environment due to less pollution and emission, but also for people. Right? So the same goes for Airbnb. People who were not home themselves because they were traveling privately or for business made their apartments available to travelers. And this approach was extremely innovative, especially in large cities where living space is a little bit difficult, right? So then there was the rewarding part. You can get to know cultures much better than from a standard hotel room. Unfortunately, we all know what became of these original concepts of Uber and Airbnb. At Uber, it has gone from a ride-sharing concept to a courier service with drivers chauffeuring full-time users who would most likely otherwise have taken local transit. So the streets are now busier than ever. The same thing happened with Airbnb. Many apartments are rented purely for Airbnb and nobody has ever lived there for a really long time. So the authenticity is no longer present in many apartments, but rather resembles a standardized hotel or holiday home, right? I find both examples extremely, exciting, as they show that society-centered design should be consistent, long-term goals, and should not give too much room for monetization opportunities after a certain period of time. That does not fit into the original concept of society-centered design. So, business, user, and society centricity should be balanced in the ideal service or product. It quickly fluctuates mainly in the direction of business, so we have to find ways that are good for the long term. Please let me know what you think about that topic. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to read more about it or learn more about it, you can find an interview I gave for the Page magazine in the current Page magazine. It's in German, so only for the German speaking people here, but make sure to check it out. Super interesting. I'm going to link it below so you can have a look. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and see you soon, my friends. Bye bye.